welcome to another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Stringer. Happy to have you here for my talk with my friend Julio Cortez. Julio is an incredible photographer, and I think really embodies all that is at the highest level of photojournalism in this country. And I'm just so impressed by his work, as were the judges for the Pulitzer Prize, when he and the team of which he was a member about a year or so ago was awarded that prize for their coverage of the unrest in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area. His work is not only in the political arena, but also extends to human interest stories as well as sporting events across the country, and just really an inspiring story, an incredible backstory from really humble beginnings in the Los Angeles area. Just a hardworking guy who's built his career to the point that he has, and it's really inspirational. So I hope you enjoy that story. Once again, our podcast brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Photography Alliance. There's so much good information on the website. I encourage you to check it out so you can see upcoming events and contests, all sorts of content that you can dig into, go down that rabbit hole of educating yourself about all that is good about photography, learn a few things, and join that community. So I encourage you to check that out. To find out what I have going on, take a look, probably I'd say on Instagram. That always has the latest and greatest, so to speak. That's Mitch Stringer Images. You can see a lot of the sporting events that I've been busying myself shooting, a lot of season-ending NFL football, as well as a visit to South Africa that I just recently returned from. So a lot to share. And if you have any questions, feel free to DM me. I'm pretty good about getting back to you in a timely way. You can always shoot me an email as well. That's studio@MitchStringerImages. And really, without further ado, I invite you to sit back, relax wherever you're listening, and enjoy my talk with Julio Cortez. Thank you very much for being on the program. Pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I've known Julio for a number of years, and I've known him initially through his work shooting sports photography in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. That's everything from NFL football to Major League Baseball, professional soccer, and much more. But his work also extends into news stories. And news stories is where he and a team from the Associated Press were awarded the Pulitzer Prize, an incredible accomplishment, obviously. And before we get into your background, Julio, what was that like, just from a reaction standpoint, when you found out that you and the team had been honored with the Pulitzer?
Well, I pretty much compare it to winning the World Series. We were watching intently on YouTube. They did a live broadcast of the announcement, and so I gathered my family around and we watched the feed, and I had prepped my kids. My sons were 1 and 3 at the time, and I prepped them and I said, if you see my photo, which they became really familiar with because over the course of a year they had seen my photo pop up over my screen over and over, or on newspapers and whatnot. So I prepped them by saying, if you see my photo on the screen, that means we won. That means we're champions. So there's a really good video on my Instagram of that moment where they're about to name it and the picture pops up before they say who wins, and I just go crazy. Tears falling down, super excited, and I guess that's got to be like hitting, the walk-off home run in Game 7 of the World Series, because I don't think I'll ever feel that kind of emotion again.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's just, really, really incredible. But, and that's a recent event, and I remember seeing the photo tied all in with the tragic events of George Floyd and all that transpired following his death. And so, let me take a step back, though, to kind of how you got started in photography. Just talk about your journey a little bit from picking up a camera for the first time, getting that first job and so forth. So Maybe share with our listeners, how did it all start?
Yeah, actually, it started when I was 12 years old. My dream of becoming a journalist kicked off then. I've only been in the country for 2 years. I came here illegally and undocumented. Uh, so I came to the country not knowing any English, and I joined my middle school newspaper, and I wrote a story on the local Parks Rec, just about what kind of sports you're able to play at the local park. And when I saw my name in print, I was like just super proud of myself because it was just a story in English, and I still was trying to master the language, but that gave me the edge to say I want to keep doing this. So for a long time, I wanted to be a reporter. I actually was working my way through college at the LA Daily News, working in the sports department as a copy boy, taking phone calls, calling coaches, high school and like varsity and junior varsity coaches to get information for stories or for agate. And one of the things that happened that kind of turned me over to photography was on 2001, on the morning of September 11th. I woke up to my brother saying, "Hey, look at what's going on TV," and I woke up and I was like, "Wow, this is historic." I didn't think much of it. I went to school, and I was sitting in a political science class where the professor said, "Today is so historic that there's newspapers across the country and across the world who are putting together an extra edition." This is before the internet was big, before cell phones. So the way you got news was to watch TV or listen to the radio. And when big news happened around the world, if it was big enough, you got a midday extra edition that papers put out. So I was sitting in that class thinking, well, wait, my paper is probably doing that. Let me go ahead and head over to see if there's anything I can do. Read some copy, or proofread something, bring information. And to get to the sports department, you had to go through the photo department. And the place was just cluttered with printouts from the wire services, all the images that were coming from New York. And I stopped and really looked and analyzed at all the images. And I thought, this is history that the world is always going to remember. And one of the pictures that really struck me is a photograph by Suzanne Plunkett. She was a freelancer for AP in New York who made an image of people running away. It's very commonly known, this image. So it's people running away. There's somebody in a like dress shirt with a tie and a backpack running frantically, and there you see smoke in the background. That image made me want to be a photographer. I thought I want to record history. I'm not really into covering sports anymore. So at that moment, kicked off that.
Well, when you talk about that exposure and that spark that really got lit within you to want to move more towards what you're doing now, any profession has different levels of proficiency that start to evolve. So when you start in photography, you're thinking about exposure, composition, the fundamentals of that. And then once you have competency around that, then it somewhat transitions to the idea of storytelling. So for you, it sounds like your earliest interest in photography around sports, but then the events of September 11th, I won't say introduced as much as brought to the forefront the idea of using one as a tool to do the other. Is that a fair way to say that?
Yeah, so I had, the dream was actually to be a beat writer. And I wanted to cover the Los Angeles Dodgers on a daily basis. That was the goal as an 18-year-old. And during that summer of my graduating high school as an 18-year-old, I went and put this camera, this Pentax K1000 camera, on layaway at a local pawn shop. It cost me $200, and I was working nights and weekends whenever I was not playing sports, and I wasn't making much money because I was only working like 2 or 3 hours at the local McDonald's. So I would take $20 for the camera, and then the rest I would ship it back to my mom in Mexico, and it wasn't much. It'd be like $150 or whatnot, but that goes a long way in Mexico in the late '90s, early 2000s. So that's how I got my first camera, and I was such a novice with the camera that I got it, and I finally had it in my hands. I went and bought some rolls, and I stuck the roll in there and closed the door, thinking it was like the automatic cameras, which just winds it up for you. So, but it didn't, because it's a fully manual camera, and so I didn't wind the camera, the film into the camera. So I kept on taking pictures, thinking I was making all this beautiful photos, and then I realized, oh, the roll wasn't even reeled in.
Turning.
So that was I learned. I self-taught most of the photography aspects. I even created a little developing room in my bathroom just to kind of get that going, and then eventually I wound up going and taking classes in college for photography. But one of the craziest things about my career is I work with a lot of people that have been around for decades who work under deadline with film, and I've never once have worked a single assignment on deadline on film. It's always been digital. So when they talk about setting up dark rooms in hotel rooms or their cars or whatnot, that's all really foreign to me because I didn't really have to do that.
Yeah, it's, you hear the stories, like you said, about people in their bathrooms at home, and they would get home from shooting, they would create contact sheets. In the cases of some photographers, they would then shop those contact sheets to local newspapers, magazines, and they'd license them. And it was, in some ways, we have it easier, but in some ways, the demand and the expectation now compared to then has changed dramatically. I know that, I shoot primarily sports and wildlife and cultural photography. And when I think of what I shoot, and I think of the benefits of autofocus, and I think about what some of these incredible photographers accomplished pre-autofocus, pre-digital, you and I sort of bridged the film to the digital realm with a camera, but as you said, as a professional, you haven't had to do that. So being at the level that you're at now and knowing what you're called upon to do, assignment after assignment, what does that make you think about the work that the photographers before you were able to accomplish?
Yeah, no, it's actually really inspirational to see what they went through just to get even a phone line to be able to send photos. But I kind of go back to the basics. So like I said, I taught myself, and since I had to get most of my stuff from pawn shops, I didn't really have like the luxury of autofocus lenses. I bought a Tokina lens 300 that it had an automatic feature on it, but it was so wonky that it was better to just shoot manual. And the way I taught myself how to shoot sports is I would go to the side of the freeway, the 101 freeway in Calabasas. There's a hill, and I would just pick cars driving by, and I would say, I put the camera down, look up, and say, all right, red car. And then just the exercise was to keep the red car in focus all the way through and make pictures along the way. And I was shooting with the early Canon cameras, which the three frames per second, so not very fast. So that was a good exercise in learning what our ancestors in photography, how they operated. They had to kind of make the image themselves. The thing with these cameras now, they're so powerful and fast that oftentimes you're not really taking photography. You're shooting what's the word? The phrase?
It's almost like spray and pray.
Spray and pray.
Yeah.
So I value what that fundamental of like that's the picture, and I got to make that picture, on the first stride as opposed to just spray and pray. I recently saw a live judging for, I believe it was the Northern Shore course, and Smiley Poole, photographer at the Dallas Morning News, was talking about images that were coming over the screen, and some of the other judges were really interested and loved this image from the Olympics, where they're shooting. It's a shooting event, and you can see the logo on the rifle. You can see the eyes. It's a tight photo, and the shell of the bullet is kind of popping out, and they loved it. I thought it was a very nice image, and I figured that's going to go far just because of the components on it. But Smiley really put it down. He was like, listen, if you shot me this picture in the 90s, I would have, bowed down, and he said, what an image, because you had to catch that casing in midair. Now you put the camera on 30 frames a second, and it's not really photography. Now it's just, you shoot a movie and then you pick the best image and go on from there. So I like to go back to the basics. And while we don't have a lot of the issues like finding a dark room or figuring out how to get a picture back to your editor, there's still other obstacles that I come across. I love doing remote cameras, and those are a challenge in themselves. Oftentimes is getting permission to set up the cameras in the right place, and also the technology doesn't always work. There's a picture that I shot this year at the Orioles that should have been a bang bang easy play photo with the remote, but I had so much interference between the two remotes, and I was literally standing about 20 feet from the camera, and I could not get the radios to talk to each other for 3 days. Very frustrating, but in process of troubleshooting and making it happen, finally on the 4th day it happened, and I was pretty pleased with the image. The image that none of my colleagues or my friends have made yet, so I feel like that was a good use of my time and my creativity.
Well, I've always been interested when I travel with other photographers, and it could be to a cultural situation where you're in an environment, a crowded environment, or you could be at a ball game and you're all shooting the game. But if you have 5 or 6 photographers, very often when different moments happen, everyone does not have the same exact photo because of the angle or the shutter speed, or someone picks up something that the other one didn't. So I guess my question is, nowadays with such a need online, especially for content, where do you, within the constraints of producing content, where does that leave you room for creativity and not just functionality of capturing an image?
Yeah, so there's a method for me to cover a lot of my stuff. It's you have to have the images that are bread and butter, the images of the key people in the story, perhaps the key play in the game, but also you really have to get creative with it. So I try to knock out all the basic stuff that's going to end up in the next paper early. That way it's out the door. I don't have to worry about it anymore, and then I get to play. So, like for example, at a baseball game, my first 3 innings are all meat and potatoes, and then I edit for maybe an inning or 2, and then from like 6 to 9 innings, or maybe 6 to 8 innings, it's play. I already have the components that I need. So now I play. This is where I look for interesting angles or very tight shots of somebody's detail, whether it's their gloves or their jewelry, or just exploring the stadium. We have the luxury here in Baltimore where you can just about shoot anywhere you want, where it's not the same at other places. I started my career with AP in New York, and Yankee Stadium is one of the most limited places to shoot. You really only have the outside wells in an elevated position that's set. Otherwise, you're not allowed to roam around. So here you have the luxury of just chasing an angle that normally wouldn't be able to get elsewhere. So I do that. Same thing with other sports, football. First half is all meat and potatoes, and then third quarter is all play. And then you leave the ninth inning, the fourth quarter, the final 2 minutes of the basketball. You leave that to like storytelling. Like these are the images that will probably decide the game. So you focus on that. If like for example last night, Santander hit 2 home runs, and I was upstairs all the way to the very top, and I got his first home run, which was good. But then in the 8th inning, he hit another one, and so that was the story really. Like even though they won 7-0, there's still like it all revolved around this guy who just came back from 6 days rest because he was hurt, and hit 2 home runs. And so I focused really on that. And those, as soon as I came back, those were the two pictures that went out on the wire soonest, because that's what tells the story.
Sure, not everybody has a 2 home run game, so
Right.
that's a big deal. I'm sure that people are wondering, for someone who's a working professional like yourself, when you're not shooting for Associated Press and it's your off time, how much photography with your family or just on your own do you do in your off time?
It varies really. I mean, currently not much because I have a lot on my plate. I have 3 young children ranging between 2 and 5 years old, and so I'm pretty busy. I do photograph them in their environment, whether it's t-ball or they're just playing in the yard or whatnot. But I mean, if I go back to my single days, I really was never off. I would work and take pictures when I was off the clock on my days off. I'd find something cool to photograph. I love photographing the moon, and in New York, it was easy because there's so many iconic buildings and statues that it's easy to do. Here, not so much in Maryland. The obstacles are high. But that's something that I would do constantly on my own time with photography. But I also like to learn new things. The pandemic was kind of hard on all of us because all our sports kind of went away, or definitely went away. So since I had all this extra time, I decided to like pick up new hobbies or new interests, and so I got really into the drone photography as something to do. And so I do a lot of that on my free time now, whether it's, again, shooting photos of my kids, or just going out and finding a pretty scenic area where I can just do some aerials. I have a love-hate relationship with drones because I love how, easy it is to do, but since I got a drone, I haven't been in a helicopter to shoot stuff, so it kind of took away that edge.
Now that makes sense. With you having made a very, very well-known picture as part of the Pulitzer Prize winning team, you find yourself from time to time in environments that are uncertain, potentially dangerous, whether it's those kind of situations where you have social unrest, you have picketing, you have conflict such as some of your work at the southern border. It's just uncertain. And so while you're focused on creating images, what is in the back of your mind, or maybe the forefront of your mind, to keep yourself safe when people are very emotionally charged, understandably, and you're there to document what's going on, but you also want to get home at night? How do you prepare mentally and then just practically for those situations?
Yeah, that's a conversation that keeps going every day for me, because it doesn't matter where you are. The situations can become dangerous, rapidly. you can't just say that you're going to go to a baseball game and you're going to be safe. Like there might be fights in the stands, and if you're sitting nearby, you might get mixed in there, or there's that situation in Washington where there was a shooting nearby, and the fans ran frantically everywhere. They went into the dugout, so it doesn't matter where you are. There's potential for danger. And I grew up in California, where you're constantly thinking the next big earthquake is coming, so you're thinking about safety always. So
everybody in California has their go bag.
Yes,
they're ready.
Yeah, I call it the oh shit bag.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of how I approach everything. I just know that there's going to be a potential for something to go wrong, and we have conversations within our team. Just to be able to stay safe. Honestly, no picture is worth the risk of your life or hurting yourself or your colleagues. I was on the steps of the Capitol on January 6th with a teammate covering that, and he got attacked by the protesters, and I was wearing a GoPro camera on my helmet, and the whole fight kind of happened in front of me, and you can kind of see just the anger and how willing people were to hurt somebody just because they didn't agree with them being there. So there's constant talk about exit strategy, safety, what's the best gear out there for safety, whether it's goggles or, even as simple as Sudicon pads, which if you're not familiar with them, they are these little wipes that you can get on Amazon, and if you were to get hit with pepper spray, you just wipe your face with it, and within minutes you're back to normal. So I've used that even at home. Like I got oil sprayed on my eye, and I put on that, and it cleared me up. So just minor little things like that, little tips on how to stay safe. I really, a lot of it goes back to my upbringing. I grew up in a rough neighborhood in LA, often getting hit up by gang members. Luckily I didn't live in a place where there was a lot of drive-bys, but there was constant awareness, self-awareness, being logical about where to go, when to go. Even the night of May 28th, when I made that image with the George Floyd protest, like that happened just because I had pulled back. I needed a breather. I photographed for a bunch of hours all this anger and destruction, and I needed to back up for a minute just to clear my head. And then that's when this person came with the upside down flag, and I'm like, oh, that's a picture I need to get. So I got back onto shooting mode and made that picture. I didn't think much of it. I knew it was going to be a photo that told some of the story. I didn't realize that it was going to tell the whole story. The amount of comments and feedback that I got from just about any part of the world about it was very mostly supportive, but people were really they felt something. They either made them really mad, or they kind of made them feel like this is kind of a joke or whatever. So, but they all felt something, which is the goal of photography. Is you want to make the viewer feel some sort of emotion, and I feel like that one does. It's so controversial, and people, whether they feel the anger of it, or they want to complain that the flag should not be used in such form. So there's definitely a lot of discussions around that.
Well, and I think as an image maker, when you have a photo that people sort of breeze by, and it's easy to do because we're all bombarded by so many images. So when people do react, it's clearly impactful, and it's really up to the viewer to determine what their reaction is. But your role is creating compelling images. Just in the last couple of minutes here, I wanted to ask you about something that I know you're involved with, and I think that probably the listeners, some of them may be serving in this role and some may be interested in this, the idea of mentorship. And I know you do some of this, and so my question or thought is, in your career, have you had the benefit of a mentor or mentors at any point? And then maybe talk a little bit about what you're doing to help up and coming and evolving photographers with your mentoring.
Yeah, I wouldn't be in my position without the help of my mentors. I had a lot of people along my career who saw something in me and really pushed me forward. I'm a member of several of journalism organizations, the NPPA, NASJ, SPJ, and those organizations have helped me a lot. I was a student member of the student projects, both at SPJ and NASJ, and the amount of doors open just by being in the projects there really helped me kind of line up the next step.
Just networking, learning and networking.
Yeah, it gives you a chance to showcase your work in front of all the working professionals at the national convention. So, and really, when AP called NASJ and said we want to partner up and we want to offer an internship to one of your students, do you have anybody to suggest? Like, my name came up, first because a lot of my mentors there really thought I was a good fit for AP, so that helped out a ton. And now, as a seasoned photographer, I've been doing this I've been graduated since for 19 years now. So I'm in a position where I can give back. So for a long time, I just kind of focused on my track, and I was just trying to make my career happen. But in the last few years, I've taken on the role of giving it all back. So I'm a mentor through NPPA. I go back to my university in Cal State Northridge in LA and mentor there. I go back to my high school and mentor there. So there's constant mentoring going left and right. I probably have like 20 mentees under my belt right now, and and that's mainly because if people approach me and say, "Hey, can you help me out? Can you look at my portfolio? What can I do to get better?" I'm all there to help. I would say that in a calendar year, I probably talk to a good 12 to 15 colleges, photos or journalism classes, and I give them all my cards and say, reach out if you need anything. And let's just say there's 20 people per class. Of all these people I give cards to, maybe 4 at the end of the year have reached back and said, "Hey, you said you can help me," and because they do stand out just by that, just by making even that connection, that first step, I'm willing to help them all out. So I go to the conventions to recruit. I'm an unofficial recruiter for AP, so we've hired a couple people within the last year that I've brought forward that I found at conventions. So that's pretty cool because, I feel like they're looking for me to find people that essentially can do what I do or can do it better.
Yeah, you're like a talent scout in a way. So for people who are listening and they want to be able to follow your work, what's the best way for people to do that?
Social media, really. My Instagram is July the Photo Guy. That's the one where I drive most of my stuff through. But I mean, if you want to see all my good and bad pictures, you can just go to AP Images and type in my name, and you can see all my work there. And you know, not every picture is the best, but you know, it's just but everything that I submit to AP is on there. It gives you a chance to see just how crazy my life is. Like one day I'm doing a baseball game, the next day I'm doing a Trump rally, the next day after that I'm doing a tornado coverage, and then back to baseball. So it's really interesting to see just the wide range of assignments that I get to do. You know, a lot of times it's really cool because it's big stuff. You know, some stuff is not necessarily things you want to be seeing or doing. You know, I always say that my job is allows me to meet the people either on their best days of their life or their worst. And so, but making pictures of people's despair, sometimes actually, you know, it's meaningful, as bad as that sounds. I'm not a complete vulture. Good example here in January 24, 2022, there's a big fire in West Baltimore, and the vacant home that they were trying to put out, 3 firefighters died, getting crushed because the building collapsed. And I took a picture that was very compelling. People really loved. I got so much response from firefighters across the country saying, thank you for photographing that, because it shows the world that we actually are human, and that we feel, you know, at the end of the day, like, we put out the fire and then we go back, but then we have all these memories and all these horrible things to deal with that normally we deal with them on our own. And so this picture of 4 firefighters sitting on a stoop across the street from where that building collapsed really tells the world that they're human and they feel something. So out of that, the brother of one of the people photographed reached out to me. We became really good friends, and I feel like we have a really strong connection. His son is the same age as my oldest, and you know, we actually made a friendship out of it. And I'm getting ready to leave Baltimore after 4 years here, and they are going to be one of the few families that I'm going to miss the most leaving here, just because, you know, it made something good out of something like a horrible situation.
Well, yeah, and when you can create an image that tells a story, not only in that moment, but a story that people can see, and a story that perseveres over time to convey, as you said, you know, the impact that the work has on, specifically in this case, firefighters, long after the fire is out. It lingers really for a lifetime. Well, I really want to thank you for your generosity of your time and all of your talent. It's been, you know, a great opportunity to sit here and talk with you, and I appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my chat with Julio Cortez. Once again, you can check out his work at July the Photo Guy on Instagram. You can also see what I have going on at MitchStringerImages.com on the World Wide Web, and you can also check out my Instagram. Instagram probably being the best place to get the most current information of what I have going on. And if you'd like to reach out with any questions to me or comments, feel free to shoot me a DM. Do my best to make sure I get back to you timely. And so we'll see you next time here on the podcast. I wish you good light and great shooting. Until then, take care.